to do as he pleased, leaving for his new target to be Persia and the new Persian king, Darius III. In 333 BC, Alexander faced the Persian army at the Battle of Issus. This significant engagement saw the Persian king Darius III defeated and forced to flee. Alexander then captured several key cities, including the vital port of Tyre, which had resisted his initial siege. In 331 BC, Alexander faced Darius III again at the Battle of Gaugamela, near the Tigris River in modern-day Iraq. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander won a decisive victory using superior tactics and mobility. The Persian army was shattered, and Darius III fled once again. Alexander then proceeded to capture the Persian capital of Babylon and took control of much of Mesopotamia. He continued his campaign eastward, winning battles in what is now modern-day Iran and Afghanistan. In 330 BC, he captured the Persian capital of Persepolis, a city of great wealth and cultural significance. But Alexander wasn't done. He wanted to expand eastward, eventually crossing the Hindu Kush mountains into India. However, his troops grew tired of the endless fighting and refused to go any further, and Alexander was forced to turn back. However, after Alexander failed in the Indian subcontinent, a powerhouse emerged in India called the Mauryan Empire. At its height, it spanned over much of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. However, this conquering came at much of a cost for its leader Ashoka the Great. In 261 BC, after the death of his parents, Ashoka decided that his empire needed to expand. In his sights, the kingdom of Kalinga. The war was bloody, the war was fierce. Over 100,000 people died. Ashoka couldn't sleep with himself. He didn't know how to deal with his actions that resulted in so much death. So he turned to the teaching of the Buddha. Under Ashoka's rule, the Mauryan Empire became known for supporting Buddhist teachings and promoting nonviolence. Ashoka issued a series of edicts inscribed on rocks and pillars throughout the empire that promoted principles such as kindness, respect for all religions, and the abolition of slavery. Certain traits were not shared in the West by Alexander. In the West, it was deemed honorable to die in combat, and a hero's death would be remembered forever. A farmer will die in anonymity. Alexander died a few years later in Babylon at the age of 32. Throughout his expedition, Alexander was spreading Greek ideas founded by his once wise teacher, bringing the rise of Greek ideals across the land, starting the seeds of the Western cultures we see today. Once Alexander died, his empire just could not sustain itself. His generals feuded as to who should be the leader of this great empire. Everyone wanted power, yet in fighting, left to waste in oblivion. Eventually, in 323 BC, after senseless wars, the Greek generals divided the world into three major empires: the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in the east, and the Antigonids in Greece. Ptolemies, one of Alexander's generals, led Egypt into a period of prosperity. Inspiration by his former leader, Ptolemies built the Library of Alexandria, a hub for an intellectual scholarship. Intellectuals from all over will come to the library to exchange ideas and thoughts throughout the world, leaving us to have great philosophers like Plato and Aristotle to be the backbone of our culture. While the general Seleucid was given the keys to the city of Babylon. Babylon at this time was a cultural hub melting Greek, Persian, Indian, and Central Asian cultures. Seleucid, though, preferred Greek ideas and Greek language. The Seleucid Empire was at its height during the reign of King Antiochus III, 223 BC to 187 BC. Under King Antiochus III, the Seleucids encompassed a vast territory from modern-day Turkey to modern-day Pakistan, one of the largest empires on record until the rise of the Romans. While the Antigonids did not have nearly as much success. By the time Antigonids I took power, the Greeks were just a shell of what they once were. The age of the Greeks was behind us. The Ptolemies, the Seleucids, and the Antigonids went astray from the Roman Empire. However, for Rome to rise, it had to face a powerful foe, Carthage. Both Rome and Carthage had a desire for the same city-state, Messina, on the island of Sicily. This would give either civilization a foothold to grab power in the Mediterranean. The First Punic War was upon us, and after 20 years of fighting, in the year 241 BCE, and the defeat of Carthage, the Treaty of Lutatius was signed. The peace, though, was short-lived. In 218 BCE, the Second Punic Wars began when the Carthaginian general Hannibal invaded Italy with his army, including elephants, to conquer Rome. Hannibal won several early battles, including the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE. Still, he was ultimately defeated by the Roman general Scipio Africanus at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. The war resulted in the complete defeat of Carthage, which was forced to cede its territories to Rome, and the end of the Carthaginian Empire. There was no doubt in the world anymore that it was time for the Romans to take charge in the West. While in the East, after the end of the Warring States period, Qin Shi Huang and the Qin dynasty were an absolute power. 221 BCE to 206 BCE, Qin was determined to turn diverse China into a unified Chinese empire. He divided the lands into 36 command areas supervised by a governor, military commander, and imperial inspector. It was expected that you followed the will of Qin, or else you would face harsh penalties. The basic ideas of legalism in action, strong government, harsh laws, and inheriting knowing that humans were necessarily selfish. However, their mandate from heaven ran quite quickly. After Qin Shi Huang's death, China was in turmoil with another dynasty on foot. Liu Bang, leader from 206 to 195 BCE, after leading a revolt against the Qin, was declared emperor of the new Han dynasty. Instead of following the strict legalistic mindset of the Qin, Liu decided to set his empire as a Confucianist paradise. The ideals of moderation, virtue, and piety, as set through Confucianism, were marched throughout the empire, weaving the cocoon of a powerful dynasty. During the Han Dynasty, the production of silk was ever increasing, and the idea of profits was in the minds of all. So in 138 BCE, Emperor Han Wu sent an imperial convoy to make contact with cultures of Central Asia and the Mediterranean. Then, after the routes were established, Chinese merchants and traders would bring their silk across the Silk Road to the Middle East and eventually Europe, where it would be sold at high profits, though in the beginning the route was relatively short. Because in 97 BC, Ambassador Kan Ying was sent to Rome with gifts of silk for their empire. However, Kan only got as far as Mesopotamia because he was told by the Parthians, the dominant empire in Iran at the time, that the journey would take years. Little did Kan know that he was misinformed, that the journey would have been relatively shorter, but the Parthians wanted to keep their spot as the middlemen. They did not want China and Rome to have contact with one another, creating a system of three empires smushed right up against each other: Rome in the west, Parthians in the center, and China in the east. Then in 86 BCE, Greece, already being weakened by the conquest of Alexander the Great, was now the target of the Roman Empire. General Lucius Cornelius Sulla led an army of legions to the forefront of Athens. He besieged Athens for several months, brutally torturing the citizens within. Eventually, when Athens fell, he ordered his soldiers to loot and pillage the city, destroying many important cultural treasures. This takeover cemented Rome as a superpower. Athens no longer had the power, but rather it was in Rome. While in 63 BCE, General Pompey was tasked with capturing Jerusalem and the region of Galilee, the Romans quickly captured the cities, forcing Galilee to be placed under Roman rule. including a small village called Nazareth. The Romans' desire to expand didn't end in Galilee, though. In 58 BCE, Julius Caesar was appointed governor of the Roman Province of Sicilian Gaul, northern Italy, with the express assignment of conquering the rest of the Gauls. At the time, the Gauls were a group of Celtic peoples who lived in that area that is now France, Belgium, and parts of Switzerland, Germany, and Italy. However, it was Caesar's job to take over these Celtic tribes, while the Gauls, who were insistent on their independence, all had to work together under the leadership of Vercingetorix in a last-ditch attempt to stop the Romans. As Caesar brought his troops to Alesia in 52 BC, war was upon us. Alesia was surrounded by a double wall and a ditch, with additional fortifications on the town's hills. Vercingetorix had gathered a large force of Gallic warriors inside the town. In contrast, Caesar had assembled a sizable Roman army outside the walls. Caesar realized that a direct assault on the town would be complex, so he surrounded the Gallic forces and starved them into submission. He ordered the construction of a series of fortifications around Alesia, including a circumvallation wall that encircled the town, and a second wall and ditch that faced outward to defend against any attempts to break out. Over several weeks, Caesar's forces engaged in a grueling siege of Alesia, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Gallic warriors inside the town made several attempts to break out, but they were repelled by the Roman forces. The tide of the battle turned in favor of the Romans when a second Gallic army, led by Vercingetorix's ally Commius, attempted to relieve the siege. Caesar sent a detachment of his forces to intercept the Gallic reinforcements. After a fierce battle, the Roman soldiers emerged victorious. With his forces surrounded and facing starvation, Vercingetorix was forced to surrender. He emerged from Alesia and offered himself as a prisoner to Caesar, effectively ending the Gallic resistance to Roman rule. Throughout the next 2 years, Caesar crossed the Gallic Empire, conquering and implementing it into Rome. The Gauls were implemented into Rome, even gaining citizenship within the empire. However, the Senate was not happy with Caesar. Even though he had great success against the Gauls, the Roman Senate wanted him to stop. They did not like the popularity Caesar was gaining, nor the power he was controlling. So the Roman Senate called upon Caesar to resign his command and disband his army, or risk being declared an enemy of the state. This led Caesar to an essential choice to make. Will he either follow the will of the Roman Senate or ignore them and start a bloody civil war? Roman law at the time prohibited any general from crossing the Rubicon River and entering mainland Italy with a standing army without the expressed permission of the Roman Senate. To do so would be treason, and this tiny stream would reveal Caesar's intentions and mark the point of no return. Civil war was imminent as Caesar and his army marched over the Rubicon. Battles in Corfinium and Pharsalus showed the Senate that Caesar was a worthy foe, so the Roman Senate appointed his son-in-law, Gnaeus Pompey, to lead the Roman forces against his father-in-law. Both parties knew the importance of Spain, due to it providing a link between Italy and the rest of Europe. The two armies clashed near the town of Leda in northeastern Spain. Caesar's army was significantly outnumbered, but he could use his superior military tactics and training to gain the upper hand in the battle. After several days of intense fighting, Caesar emerged victorious, forcing Pompey's forces to retreat, declaring Caesar as the new leader of Rome. When Caesar made it back to Rome, the crowds were chanting, "Hail Caesar! Hail Caesar!" The people then decided that he would be the dictator of Rome for life. Caesar immediately set to work, implementing a series of reforms and policies aimed at improving ordinary Romans' lives and strengthening the central government's power. He ordered the construction of new infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, and aqueducts, which helped to connect different parts of the city and improve trade and commerce. Caesar also enacted a series of political and social reforms, including granting citizenship to many people living in the Roman Empire and creating new laws and customs that were based on Roman practices. He encouraged the spread of the Latin language and culture throughout the city and established the Julian calendar,